Titanfall 2 was released on the 28th of October 2016, and although faltering financially upon launch, as well as being the victim of harsh DDoS attacks, it has garnered a cult following of loyal players who stuck with the game until Respawn Entertainment fixed the servers earlier this year. Its successor, Apex Legends, arguably the reason for EA and Respawn abandoning Titanfall for so long, has made over $2 billion in gross revenue since its surprise release in February of 2019. It demonstrated how competitive movement shooters were still possible in the modern era, a genre that the majority thought had been left behind and replaced by the all too common realistic FPS games we see today. Now, what if I told you that the two games I just mentioned were made on the same engine as Skibidi Toilet? Albeit highly modified, Titanfall 1, 2 and Apex Legends were created with Valve's renowned Source engine at its core. I thought, with the release of Source 2 in 2023, it was time to look back upon the history of the most iconic game engine ever, and the legacy that it has left behind. Valve is a company that used to make video games. It was founded in 1996 by former Microsoft employees Gabe Newell and Mike Harrington, and released their first game, that being Half-Life, 2 years later. Half-Life was a smash hit success, built upon the Gold Source engine, not to be confused with Source, which itself at its core was a modified version of the Quake engine. Half-Life sold 9.3 million copies, spawning 3 expansions, a sequel, Half-Life 2, its expansions, and countless other games and franchises built upon its framework. Not only that, but the community made countless mods that also found success. One of the most notable is Counter-Strike 1.6, originally created as a mod to Half-Life, eventually going on to become one of the most successful esports of all time. Valve enabled this by releasing the game's software development kit, which I'll be referring to as an SDK, alongside the game. This allowed fans, community developers, and whole studios to create maps, mods, and even whole games with the same tools that Valve used to create Half-Life itself. With that background info out of the way, it's time to take a look at Gold Source's successor, the Source engine. Source was created by Valve during the development of Half-Life 2. When the game released, Valve made it extremely clear that this was going to be the future of their games, porting Counter-Strike and Half-Life, their two most successful games at the time, onto the new engine. Although both games were divisive amongst fans, the altered movement and new graphics pushed some away from the new versions, many finding them untrue to the original games, and many Counter-Strike players who had spent thousands of hours on 1.6 were unwilling to switch over. However, it is inarguable that these games should use the power of Source, and fans quickly realised that the new engine had a boatload of potential. Source flaunted a revolutionary physics system called Havoc, the likes of which had never been seen before. Almost all objects placed in the world could be interacted with and react to other entities in the game. For example, using the gravity gun in Half-Life 2, you can throw barrels, boxes, and anything else that you can get your hands on at enemies. My favourite are the saw blades you find scattered around. Picking one of them up and throwing it will slice any unfortunate enemies clean in half, with it even having the ability to slice through multiple enemies at once. These mechanics, and the way that the physics engine handles them, creates whole different ways to play the game, thanks in part to the willingness of the developers to let the player mess around with it. Think the zero-point energy field manipulator, gravity gun for short, or the Aperture Science portable quantum tunneling device, portal gun, respectively. At a glance, these tools given to the player may be written off as nothing more than a gimmick, intended to make Source games stand out from the hordes of single-player campaigns that were on store shelves at the time. The Source physics system is many things, but one thing that is not is a gimmick. When in the hands of Valve, they build their games from the ground up with it in mind. With Half-Life 2 being a prime example. In the chapter Water Hazard, you have to create a ramp for your airboat by using empty water barrels scattered around the area as buoys, lifting up the piece of convenient flotsam enough to launch you and your airboat over an inconvenient blockage in the canal system. A puzzle so effortlessly simple, yet so revolutionarily groundbreaking. In 2004, of course. I think that the Source physics system is at its best in Valve's 2007 release Portal, and its sequel Portal 2. With the ability to not only throw stuff around, but to send them through portals, seamlessly transferring momentum, direction and velocity, is a technological marvel. Following the success of the previously mentioned Half-Life 2, Valve sought to capitalise off the engine they had spent years developing. So they made Portal, a game dedicated to physics puzzles and physics puzzles only. Knowing that they had to continue pushing the boundaries of what's possible to stay competitive, they decided to one-up themselves. Instead of pushing for realism, they decided to push past it. If you're watching a video essay on the Source engine, I'm sure you at least know the basics of portals, an idea that originated as the final project of a couple university students at the DigiPen Institute of Technology, called Narbacular Drop, and through acquisition by Valve, and being rebuilt on the Source engine, it became the Portal we know today. The Source engine's physics system went hand in hand with this strikingly unique idea. You can send objects through portals, use portals to build up momentum, and in general use them to carry around anything needed for the puzzle room you are attempting. The power of the Source engine, partnered with Valve pushing the boundaries for what is thought to be possible in a video game, came together as the masterpiece which we know now as Portal. And don't even get me started on the sequel. Besides the technical marvel that the Source engine was when it was released in 2004, Valve had no shame in demonstrating how the sausage was made, so to speak. Similarly to its predecessor Gold Source, when released alongside Half-Life 2 in 2004, Valve made Source's software development kit available to the public. It came with 3 tools: the Hammer map editor, the face poser, and the model viewer. Moreover, the Source SDK came with the source code for Half-Life 2, practically begging for players to tinker around with the game, opening up the infinite possibilities for modders and game developers. This decision to throw open the doors to community content and the such is inarguably the reason that these games are still so relevant to this day. New mods and games based off the framework provided by Half-Life 2 and created with the Source SDK are being released all the time. This is thanks in part to Valve's willingness to continue supporting the engine throughout its almost 2-decade-long lifespan. Back when they used to make games, they would update the engine alongside their new releases. The SDK currently supports the 2006, 2007 and 2009 versions of the engine, with a separate 2013 version also available. These updates were instrumental in giving Source the longevity necessary to stay competitive in the video game industry. Just look at the difference between Half-Life 2 and its 2007 expansion. The strides made in graphical capability are astounding. On a side note, it's still mind-blowing how good these games look even in modern day. They look, play and feel like something released in the past couple years, not 2 decades ago. With Source 1 now being phased out by Valve, with all their new releases being on Source 2, it begs the question, what is the future for the Source engine? Its successor Source 2 has been around since 2015, with Dota 2 being the first game ported over to it. The first fully fledged release on the engine was Half-Life Alyx in 2020, a VR exclusive that showed off the power of Valve's new in-house physics engine, Rubicon. Intended to replace Havoc, Rubicon will hopefully give Valve a lot more freedom in what exactly they want to do with physics in their games. Furthermore, Source 2 runs programs finally at 64-bit, which is obviously a contrast to the original being stuck on 32 even to this day. The change will allow Source 2 to handle more data, making it mathematically more powerful. This essentially means more stuff can happen in-game, without the engine crashing. Any other technical details known to the public about Source 2 are miles above my understanding of video game development, so I'm not going to pretend I know what I'm talking about. But what I do know is that it's safe to say that any future Valve releases aren't going to be on Source 1. However, that doesn't mean this is the end of the line for the original engine. Valve is hesitant to release the SDK of Source 2 to the public because, to put it simply, they haven't finished developing it yet. The only development tools we have at the moment are the ones for Dota 2, and the version of Source 2 from 2015 is obviously remarkably primitive. Thanks to that, I think it's safe to say that the original Source engine, a software that outdates me, probably you watching this, and YouTube itself, is going to stick around for a while, just because the community surrounding it is so damn good with it. There's some wizards out there who can do incredible things with these rather simple tools handed down from the heavens by Valve. Ever since its release in 2004, the Source engine has been a heavyweight to the video game industry. One of the oldest development softwares still used today, its usage in games, animation and much more has cemented it as one of the most iconic game engines of all time. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Please feel free to check out some of my other stuff, and of course, subscribe to be notified of more coming soon.